Los Angeles. Midnight. The air was thick with the scent of fresh rain on pavement, the distant hum of traffic mixing with the occasional barking of a dog. In the heart of an upscale gated community, where the streets were lined with pristine lawns and million-dollar homes, one man stood in the shadows, seething. Roger Caldwell's narrow blue eyes locked onto the sleek black Dodge Charger, parked in front of a house that did not belong to anyone on his HOA-approved resident list. His fingers curled into fists. It wasn't just the presence of the car that bothered him, it was the arrogance of it, sitting there bold and unafraid, as if mocking his authority. The reflective LAPD decals gleamed under the streetlights. But Roger didn't care. It was his neighborhood, his rules, his streets. He pulled his phone from his pocket, tapping the screen aggressively as he dialed a number. The moment the line connected, his voice was sharp, brimming with authority. "Hey, yeah, this is Roger Caldwell, HOA president of Willow Creek Estates. I need a vehicle towed, immediately." A groggy voice on the other end hesitated. Sir, LAPD cars?" "It's not a real cop car, idiot," Roger snapped. "I don't care what it says on the side. It's parked illegally in my neighborhood, and I want it gone. Now." There was a brief pause before the towing operator reluctantly confirmed the dispatch. Roger smirked. He was done letting these outsiders disrespect the order he had built here. His HOA laws were absolute, and if someone thought they could just park wherever they pleased, they were about to learn the hard way. A soft breeze rustled through the palm trees, but Roger barely noticed. His eyes stayed fixed on the black Charger, waiting, almost daring someone to come claim it. A few minutes passed in silence, then, just as he was about to step away, he heard footsteps. Slow, controlled, dangerous. The kind of footsteps that made even a man like Roger instinctively tense up. And then he saw him. A man emerged from the shadows of the driveway, walking towards the car with the kind of confidence that only came from knowing exactly who he was, and knowing that everyone else did too. Shaved head, chiseled jaw, an intensity in his eyes that could burn through steel. Roger's smirk faltered. Jason. Freaking. Statham. Dressed in black jeans and a fitted leather jacket, Statham moved with a precision that screamed military discipline. His face was unreadable, but there was something in the way he carried himself that felt dangerous. He reached the car and ran a hand over the hood like it was an old friend. Then finally he turned his gaze to Roger. "Something wrong?" His voice was low, edged with a British accent that made it somehow even more intimidating. Roger straightened his posture, masking his momentary hesitation with sheer arrogance. "Yeah, you can't park here." Statham exhaled sharply, a breath that almost resembled a chuckle. "That's so?" "Yes, that's so." Roger crossed his arms. "This is private property, and that car is getting towed." Statham glanced over Roger's shoulder. Red and blue lights flickered in the distance. "Tow truck incoming." He sighed. "You've made a mistake, mate." Roger scoffed. "Oh, I don't think so. See, I run this neighborhood. People follow my rules. You're just another outsider who thinks he's above them." Statham took a step closer. Roger felt his throat tighten but stood his ground. "I don't just think I'm above them," Statham said, his voice dangerously calm. "I know I am." Roger clenched his jaw. He didn't care who this man was. He wasn't about to back down. The tow truck rumbled to a stop a few feet away, its bright lights illuminating the tension between the two men. The driver stepped out, hesitant. Sir, I didn't realize whose car this was." Roger waved him off. "It doesn't matter. Hook it up." The driver hesitated, but when Roger shot him an impatient glare, he obeyed. Statham watched in silence as the tow truck operator attached chains to the Charger, its tires lifting off the ground. Finally he spoke. "You're gonna regret this." Roger sneered. "I doubt it." But something about the way Statham's eyes never left his face, that cold, unreadable expression, made Roger feel the tiniest hint of unease. Jason Statham wasn't just another rich celebrity, and Roger had just made an enemy he couldn't afford to have. To be continued. Jason Statham leaned against the sidewalk, watching as the tow truck hauled his car away. his fingers curled into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. This wasn't just any car. It was a stunt vehicle from his upcoming movie, designed to replicate an LAPD undercover cop car for one of the most intense chase sequences ever filmed. Authentic down to the last detail, but legally registered as a personal vehicle. Yet, here it was, being towed like some abandoned junker. Roger Caldwell stood there, arms crossed, a smug smirk stretching across his face like he'd just won a war. Jason could see it in his eyes. This wasn't about the car. It never was. Roger wasn't just an HOA president. He was a control freak, the kind of man who thrived on power trips, using his authority to decide who belonged and who didn't. He had spent years turning Willow Creek Estates into his personal kingdom, enforcing rules that always seemed to benefit his preferred residents, the wealthy, white elites, while conveniently making life unbearable for anyone who didn't fit his mold. Jason had done his research. Dozens of complaints had been filed against Roger by Black and minority homeowners. Unjust citations, selective rule enforcement, bogus fines for trivial infractions. And every single case had been conveniently swept under the rug. Now Jason was getting a first-hand experience of Roger's abuse of power. And he wasn't the type to forget. He exhaled, stepping toward Roger, keeping his voice even. "You towed a legally parked car. That's theft." Roger scoffed. "No, that's me keeping my neighborhood in order. You're not a cop, Statham. And even if you were, I don't care. I don't tolerate outsiders thinking they can break my rules." Jason's jaw clenched. "You mean rules you make up as you go?" Roger's smirk didn't waver. "The only rules that matter are the ones I enforce." Jason took a slow step forward, his presence alone enough to make most men shrink back. But Roger didn't flinch. He loved this, proving he had the upper hand. Jason could see it now, the thrill in Roger's eyes, the power trip coursing through his veins. But Roger wasn't finished. His voice dropped to a low, mocking tone. "Now, if you've got a problem with that, I can always call the real cops." Jason felt something in his chest tighten. He wasn't a stranger to corrupt men using law enforcement as their personal weapon. It was a familiar script, one he'd seen play out too many times, some arrogant wannabe dictator throwing his weight around, knowing that a single phone call could turn an inconvenience into a full-blown nightmare. Roger leaned in slightly, eyes glinting. "It'd be a shame if you resisted, though. LAPD doesn't take kindly to that. You know how they handle aggressive types." Jason's hands twitched. He knew exactly what Roger was implying. Roger wasn't just threatening him with an arrest. He was testing him, baiting him, waiting for one wrong move, one moment of anger, so he could watch him get taken down hard. Jason took a slow breath, forcing his pulse to steady. Not yet. He memorized Roger's face, the arrogance, the disdain, the pure entitlement that dripped from every word. He'd met men like this before, and they always had a weakness. Jason gave him a small, almost amused smile. "You don't have to call the cops, mate." Roger raised an eyebrow. "No?" Jason shook his head. "Because one way or another, I'm going to handle this myself." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty flashed across Roger's face. Jason turned on his heel and walked away, leaving the HOA president standing there, still holding his phone, still smirking. But that smirk wouldn't last for long. Not when Jason Statham was the one coming for him. Jason sat in his trailer, his fingers tapping against the armrest of the chair. His stunt car was gone, the production was at a standstill, and he could feel the weight of $500,000 slipping through his fingers with every hour that passed. This wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. This was war. At first, he thought Roger was just some HOA dictator on an ego trip. But after a few calls, he realized it was much worse than that. The tow company refused to release the car, despite the fact that Jason had all the legal paperwork. The impound lot demanded a special clearance from the HOA board, something that had never been required before. And guess who controlled the HOA board? Roger Caldwell. Jason's grip tightened around his phone. This wasn't an accident. Roger wasn't just throwing his weight around. He was deliberately trying to make Jason's life hell. The production team was already on edge. "Jason, we're bleeding money here," his producer, Mark, grumbled over the phone. "The delay is costing us $500,000 per day. We need that car back or we're rewriting the whole damn sequence." Jason exhaled slowly. He wasn't going to let this go. "I'll handle it." But Roger was always a step ahead. By the time Jason's legal team started looking into HOA policies, Roger had already flipped the script. A news report flashed across the screen of Jason's phone. "Hollywood action, star violates HOA rules, stunt car, illegally parked in private community." Jason's jaw tightened as he scrolled through the article. Roger had taken their entire confrontation, twisted it, and fed it to the media. According to the HOA's official statement, Jason had deliberately violated community parking rules, ignored multiple warnings, and had been aggressive toward board members. Roger had even given a press interview, standing in front of a row of pristine white mansions, arms crossed like some sort of righteous defender of suburban peace. "We don't make exceptions here," Roger told reporters. "Not even for celebrities who think they're above the law." Jason clenched his teeth. That smug bastard. It got worse. The LAPD released a statement confirming that Jason's car was not an actual police vehicle, which Roger used as proof that Jason was misleading the public. Jason's phone buzzed again. Another call. His publicist. "Jason, this is spiraling. The studio's getting calls. They don't want negative PR before the movie release." Jason pinched the bridge of his nose. "Let me guess. Damage control? The studio's asking you to make peace with the HOA. They don't want a legal battle. They want this to go away. Quietly." Jason knew what that meant. "Apologize. Back down. Pay whatever fine," Roger demanded. His stomach twisted at the thought. They wanted him to roll over and let this bastard win. Mark, the producer, called back, his voice lower this time. "Jason, we need this to be over. Just settle. Pay the damn fine. Let Roger have his win. We'll handle it in private." Jason let out a bitter laugh. Roger wanted power. He wanted control. He wanted Jason to kneel. And the studio was ready to hand it to him. Jason had spent his entire life fighting against men like this. Men who thought money and influence could protect them from consequences. He wasn't about to start losing now. His voice was cold, calm. "I don't do quiet settlements," Mark sighed. "Then you better be ready for war, mate, because Roger's got the upper hand." Jason stared at the news article again, Roger's smug face plastered across the screen. "Upper hand? Not for long." Jason knew one thing for sure. Roger had power, but he wasn't invincible. If Roger thought he could play dirty, Jason was more than ready to return the favor. He just needed proof. That night, Jason drove back into the neighborhood, careful to stay out of sight. He parked a few blocks away and walked towards the HOA office, a sleek white building tucked between luxury houses. He didn't have a plan, not yet, but he knew one thing. Men like Roger always left a trail. As he scanned the area, a voice called out behind him. "You're not the first one he's done this to." Jason turned sharply, ready for a fight. But the man standing there wasn't a threat. He was old, frail, with tired eyes and a defeated posture. A former soldier, maybe late 60s. "Name's William Carter," the man said. "Roger ruined my life." Jason narrowed his eyes. "How?" William sighed. "I used to be on the HOA board 5 years ago. Roger forced me out, took everything I had." Jason could see the weight of it in the man's face. "He made up fake violations, fined me until I couldn't keep up. When I fought back, he got my property value tanked. No one would buy my house. I had no choice but to sell to a company Roger secretly owns." Jason clenched his jaw. That explained a lot. Roger wasn't just a racist HOA president. He was a crook running an entire operation. Jason crossed his arms. "You still got any proof?" William smirked. "I got more than that." They met in William's tiny apartment, barely furnished, walls covered in old photos of a life he'd lost. William pulled out a USB drive and plugged it into his laptop. "This is 5 years of Roger's dirty work," he said. False violations, property scams, bribes. In your case, it's just another day for him. Jason leaned in, scanning the files. HOA complaint records, payment logs, emails. Roger had been abusing his power for years. But then, William clicked on a CCTV folder. And there it was. Clear as day, footage from a security camera near Jason's stunt car. Roger standing by the car, making a call, smirking. And then, the tow truck rolling in, without a legal violation in sight. Jason's lips curled into a grin. Gotcha. For the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe. This wasn't just proof. This was the first punch in a fight Roger never saw coming. The next morning, Roger lost his mind. He stormed into the impound lot, barking orders, demanding to know who leaked the footage. His phone blew up, reporters calling, HOA members asking questions. Then, Jason did what he did best. He went public. He posted the footage online, exposing Roger for the fraud he was. The comments exploded within hours. Wait, so the HOA president is just a racist bully? Jason Statham versus a corrupt HOA? I'm buying popcorn. Imagine flexing on an action star and losing. Jason had won round one. But Roger? He wasn't done yet. As Jason scrolled through the comments, a private message popped up on his phone. Unknown number. You think this is over? You have no idea who you're messing with. Jason exhaled, rolling his neck. Game on. Jason's small victory didn't last long. The next morning, he woke up to the sound of pounding on his front door. LAPD, open up! Jason's instincts kicked in immediately. He wasn't the kind of guy to get rattled. He had been in too many real fights, too many war zones on screen. But this was real. He opened the door to find two uniformed officers standing there, hands resting on their belts. Jason Statham? One of them asked. Jason didn't answer. He just gave them a look. Sir, we have a complaint against you for multiple violations under the HOA charter. Illegal parking, failure to comply with neighborhood regulations, and obstruction of property access. Jason exhaled through his nose. So this was Roger's next move. Fake charges, legal harassment, the same playbook he'd used for years. The officer continued, You're required to appear for questioning at the precinct today. Jason tilted his head. Or what? The second cop smirked. Or we bring you in. Jason didn't have a choice. At the precinct, Jason sat across from a smug-looking lawyer in a cheap suit. This is a simple matter, Mr. Statham, the man said, adjusting his tie. You violated HOA regulations. Your vehicle was illegally parked. We have complaints from multiple residents. Jason leaned forward. Really? Multiple residents? The lawyer smiled. Yes. Jason chuckled. You mean Roger Caldwell? The lawyer kept his face blank, but Jason knew he had hit the mark. This wasn't about a parking violation. This was about control. Jason had embarrassed Roger, and now Roger was trying to bury him. As soon as Jason left the precinct, his phone exploded with messages. Breaking, Jason Statham, accused of breaking HOA laws in LA gated community. Hollywood star Jason Statham causing trouble in luxury neighborhood? Roger had gone straight to the media. And it was working. By the time Jason reached the studio, his producer was already waiting for him, face pale, hands clenched. Jason, we need to talk. Jason exhaled. Let me guess. The studio's nervous? The producer hesitated. More than nervous. Jason's stomach dropped. They're considering replacing you. This wasn't just about a movie anymore. Jason had been in Hollywood for years. He knew how this worked. Once the media painted you as a problem, the industry turned its back on you. And Roger, he was counting on that. Jason clenched his fists. If this was how Roger wanted to play, Jason was going to take it a step further. He needed something big, something that would destroy Roger completely. And that's when fate stepped in. Late that night, Jason got a message from William Carter. William, I found something. Meet me. Jason didn't hesitate. They met in a dark parking lot, William holding an old folder in his hands. His expression was tense. "This isn't just about you, Jason. Roger's been running a scam for years." Jason frowned. "What kind of scam?" William handed over the file. Inside, a stack of HOA financial records. And hidden inside those records, a paper trail leading straight to Roger. He had been illegally finding residents, forcing them to sell their homes at a loss, only for those houses to be bought by a shell company he controlled. He wasn't just abusing his power. He was running a full-blown real estate scam. Jason's grip on the file tightened. This was it. This was the ammunition he needed. Roger thought he could ruin Jason's career. Jason was about to ruin his entire life. Jason didn't waste time. Roger had played dirty. Now it was Jason's turn to hit back. With William Carter's help, he spent the next 48 hours digging through every piece of evidence they had. Emails, financial records, illegally issued fines, fake HOA violations. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth. Roger wasn't just a power-hungry racist. He was a full-blown white-collar criminal. Jason's first move? He contacted two of Roger's biggest enemies, ex-HOA members who had been forced out of their homes. "I have proof he scammed you," Jason told them, "and I'm taking him down." By the end of the night, they were all in. Next, Jason reached out to his PR team. "Set up a press conference. Tomorrow." His manager hesitated. "Jason, this is dangerous. Roger has powerful connections." Jason cut him off. "And I have something more powerful." The manager frowned. "What's that?" Jason smiled. The truth. The next morning, the world watched as Jason Statham walked onto a stage. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. Roger was watching too, sitting comfortably in his mansion, whiskey in hand, convinced that nothing could touch him. Jason leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about a man who thought he was untouchable." A hush fell over the room. Jason continued. "This man runs a corrupt HOA, illegally fines homeowners, and forces people out of their houses, only to buy those properties himself." A murmur spread through the audience. This was big. "His name," Jason said, pausing for effect, "is Roger Caldwell." And then, Jason dropped the bombshell. He held up printed emails, bank statements, and internal HOA documents, proving Roger's fraud. On live television. At that moment, Roger's phone blew up. His board members were turning against him. His lawyer was panicking. And outside, two unmarked police cars were pulling up. Back at the press conference, a reporter raised a hand. "Jason, do you think Roger will face legal consequences?" Jason smirked. "I don't think. I know." And right on cue, a news alert flashed across the screen behind him. "Breaking: HOA President Roger Caldwell arrested for fraud harassment." The audience erupted in gasps and camera clicks. Jason looked straight at the camera. "I told you, Roger, no one is untouchable." Meanwhile, at Roger's mansion, bang, bang, bang. "Police, open the door!" Roger stumbled back, panicked. "No, no, this is a mistake," he shouted. But there was no escape. The door burst open, and within seconds, two officers had him in cuffs. A reporter shoved a mic in his face as he was let out. "Roger, any comment?" Roger snarled. "This is a setup. Jason Statham is behind this." And then, just as Roger was shoved into the squad car, Jason pulled up. He stepped out, walked right up to the car window, and looked Roger in the eye. Roger, furious, hissed, "You think you're a hero?" Jason grinned. "Nah." He patted the roof of the car. "I just don't like bullies. Justice served. Revenge taken." And Jason? His movie was back on. And as the cameras rolled on set, someone asked him, "So what's next for Jason Statham?" Jason smirked at the camera. "I think I just wrapped my best action scene yet." Inside a dimly lit jail cell, Roger Caldwell sat on a cold metal bench. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a standard orange jumpsuit. But his ego, that was still intact. His lawyer stood outside the cell, nervously adjusting his tie. Roger, the evidence against you is overwhelming. You need to cooperate. Roger leaned forward, gripping the bars with a smirk. You think I'm done? I built this town. I have connections that can bury Jason Statham. The lawyer hesitated. Roger, listen. Roger cut him off. I'm not going down alone. His eyes burned with arrogance. I still own people, and when I get out, Jason will regret this. Meanwhile, Jason stood on the rooftop of his hotel, looking down at the glowing Los Angeles skyline. A cool breeze swept through, but his mind was still hot with everything that had happened. Roger was behind bars. Justice had been served. But why didn't it feel over? Because deep down, Jason knew this wasn't just about one man. This was about a system that had let Roger get away with corruption for years. Jason exhaled. One man down, but how many more are out there? The next morning, a reporter shoved a mic in Jason's face as he stepped out of a courthouse. Jason, do you think Roger will stay in prison? Jason adjusted his jacket. That's up to the law. Do you have anything to say to Roger? Jason stopped, looked straight at the camera. And then, with a sharp intensity, he said, Power doesn't belong to those who make the rules. It belongs to those who have the guts to stand against them. The clip went viral within minutes. Fans, journalists, even politicians started discussing the case. Jason hadn't just won a personal battle. He had exposed a flaw in the system. But just as he was ready to move on, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Jason answered. Who's this? A shaky voice whispered, I saw what you did to Roger. Jason frowned. And you are? The voice hesitated. Someone who needs your help. Jason's grip tightened on the phone. With what? A pause. Then, Roger wasn't the only one running a scam. Jason's pulse quickened. Go on. The voice almost in a whisper. I know something bigger. And if you don't stop them, they'll do worse than Roger ever did. Jason's jaw clenched. Where do I find you? Silence. Then click. Call ended,